Redmond, Washington, May 22nd, 2016, 11:54 p.m. Microsoft's campus sat silent under the Pacific Northwest gloom, its servers powering the world's digital backbone. Security footage shows a company shuttle bus parked outside a restricted loading bay, the driver moving crates with the calm routine of a man long invisible among 40,000 employees. But those crates didn't hold office supplies. They contained $34 million in cutting-edge server hardware bound for Azure data centers. Instead of delivering them, driver Tommy Alvarez executed Seattle's boldest corporate heist, exploiting trust and access no one questioned. By midnight, the bus was on I-5, vanishing with hardware that foreign governments and black markets would pay fortunes to obtain. Microsoft built the cloud, recalled FBI investigator Maria Santos, but one man drove away with the storm and disappeared completely. Before we continue, hit subscribe, drop a like, and comment the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The man behind the wheel was Thomas "Tommy" Alvarez, 45, a contract shuttle driver who had spent 6 years ferrying Microsoft employees between buildings while barely earning enough to survive in one of America's most expensive metropolitan areas. Thomas Alvarez arrived in Redmond, Washington in March 2010, drawn by the promise of steady employment with one of the world's most successful technology companies. As a contract shuttle driver for Microsoft's campus transportation system, Tommy became part of the invisible infrastructure that kept the software giant's daily operations running smoothly. Tommy's job was essentially to be human infrastructure, explains former Microsoft facilities manager David Park. He transported employees between buildings, moved equipment when needed, and handled logistics that were too routine for managers to worry about, but too important to ignore. Tommy's routes covered Microsoft's entire Redmond campus, a sprawling complex of offices, laboratories, and data centers where some of the world's most valuable intellectual property was developed and tested. His access credentials allowed him into areas that many Microsoft employees never saw, including secure facilities where prototype hardware was stored and tested. Contract drivers like Tommy had broader access than most full-time employees, admits former security consultant Dr. Jennifer Liu. They needed to reach every building, every loading dock, every area where transportation services might be required. We gave them master access because restricting their movement would have made their jobs impossible. For 6 years, Tommy performed his duties with a reliability that made him virtually invisible to Microsoft's management hierarchy. He worked overtime when requested, covered for colleagues during vacations, and maintained the kind of perfect attendance record that supervisors valued but never really noticed. Tommy was the epitome of a dependable contractor, recalls former colleague Maria Rodriguez. He showed up on time, did his job without complaint, and never drew attention to himself. In a company full of brilliant engineers and ambitious executives, Tommy was just part of the background. But Tommy's personal life was deteriorating in ways that would eventually drive him toward the most desperate decision of his career. His divorce from Linda Alvarez in 2013 had resulted in child support payments that consumed nearly half his take-home pay, and Seattle's skyrocketing cost of living was making his modest wages increasingly inadequate. Tommy was caught in the same economic trap that affects millions of working-class people in tech cities, explains labor economist Dr. Patricia Valdez. He worked for one of the world's most profitable companies, but he couldn't afford to live in the community where he provided essential services. Tommy's financial situation worsened when his mother was diagnosed with cancer in 2015, requiring expensive treatments that Medicare didn't fully cover. The additional medical expenses pushed Tommy's finances beyond their breaking point, forcing him to take out high-interest loans just to meet his basic obligations. Tommy was living in his car for several months during 2015, reveals former roommate Carlos Martinez. He would shower at the Microsoft gym and sleep in employee parking lots. Management never knew because he never missed a shift and always maintained professional appearance. It was during this period of maximum desperation that Tommy began to notice aspects of Microsoft's operations that would eventually inspire his criminal plan. His transportation duties occasionally included moving hardware between different facilities, giving him intimate knowledge of how valuable equipment was tracked, secured, and transported. Tommy received an inadvertent education in Microsoft's logistics vulnerabilities, explains corporate security expert Dr. Michael Torres. He understood exactly how equipment moved through the campus, when inventories were audited, and where security attention was focused. More importantly, Tommy began to understand the enormous black market value of the hardware he occasionally transported. Conversations between engineers and managers revealed that Microsoft's server technology was desperately sought after by foreign competitors, criminal organizations, and intelligence services seeking to reverse engineer American cloud computing. Innovations. Tommy learned that the servers he moved were worth more per unit than luxury cars in Edmonds Park. Foreign governments, criminal hackers, and competing companies were all willing to pay premium prices for Microsoft's cloud infrastructure technology. This knowledge, combined with Tommy's growing financial desperation and his detailed understanding of Microsoft's security procedures, created the foundation for what would become the largest corporate theft in Seattle's history. By 2016, cloud computing had become the most valuable sector in the technology industry, and Microsoft's Azure platform was rapidly becoming the infrastructure backbone for businesses worldwide. The servers powering Azure represented cutting-edge technology worth billions in research and development, and astronomical prices on black markets serving foreign governments and criminal organizations. Microsoft's server technology was the crown jewel of American cloud computing, explains technology industry analyst Dr. Angela Chen. Their hardware designs, cooling systems, and networking innovations were years ahead of anything competitors could develop independently. Tommy's position in Microsoft's transportation system had given him unique insights into the company's most sensitive operations. His roots included the secure facilities where prototype servers were tested, the logistics centers where equipment was staged for deployment, and the loading docks where millions of dollars worth of hardware moved between buildings. Tommy had access to areas and information that most Microsoft executives never saw, admits former logistics director Dr. Sarah Kim. He understood our supply chain vulnerabilities, our inventory procedures, and our security blind spots better than anyone in management realized. The specific opportunity that Tommy would exploit emerged from Microsoft's aggressive expansion of Azure data centers during the cloud computing boom. The company was deploying servers so rapidly that normal tracking and security procedures were being stretched beyond their designed capacity. Microsoft's success was creating logistical challenges that our security systems hadn't anticipated, explains former operations manager Jennifer Torres. We were moving hardware so quickly that inventory tracking often lagged behind physical deployment by days or weeks. Tommy's research had also revealed the sophisticated black market networks that specialized in trading stolen technology. Through overheard conversations and careful observation, he learned that foreign intelligence services, criminal organizations, and competitor companies maintained extensive networks for acquiring American technology through illegal channels. Tommy discovered that Microsoft's server technology was among the most valuable targets in industrial espionage, explains international technology crime specialist Agent Robert Park. Foreign governments considered our cloud infrastructure to be critical strategic assets worth any price to acquire. The technical challenges of Tommy's plan were significant. Microsoft's servers were specialized equipment requiring careful handling and technical knowledge to transport without damage. Moving $34 million worth of hardware would require precise coordination of vehicles, storage facilities, and buyers. Tommy's theft required the same logistical sophistication that Microsoft used for legitimate deployments, observes Dr. Torres. He essentially had to create a parallel supply chain that could handle millions of dollars worth of sensitive equipment without triggering any security alerts. Tommy's preparation involved months of intelligence gathering about Microsoft's security, procedures, inventory systems, and personnel schedules. He identified the optimal timing, the most vulnerable facilities, and the transportation methods that would minimize his exposure to detection. Tommy approached his crime like a military operation, explains criminal behavior analyst Dr. Patricia Rodriguez. He studied Microsoft's procedures with the same attention to detail that the company's engineers brought to software development. The psychological preparation was equally challenging. Tommy was planning to betray the trust of colleagues who had worked alongside him for 6 years and potentially damage the company that had provided his livelihood during difficult personal periods. Tommy struggled with the moral implications of his plan, observes Dr. Rodriguez. He understood that his theft would harm people he genuinely liked, but his financial desperation had reached the point where conventional ethics seemed like luxuries he couldn't afford. As Memorial Day weekend 2016 approached, Tommy had assembled all the elements necessary to execute what would become the most sophisticated corporate theft in Pacific Northwest history. Memorial Day weekend 2016 represented the ideal opportunity for Tommy's theft. A three-day period when Microsoft's campus would be operating with skeleton staffing, minimal security oversight, and the kind of relaxed procedures that made unusual activities less likely to attract attention. Holiday weekends were always challenging for campus security, explains former Microsoft Security Director Dr. Sarah Chen. We had essential operations that needed to continue running, but most management and oversight personnel were off duty. It created windows where normal procedures might be abbreviated or delayed. Tommy's plan leveraged every aspect of knowledge he had accumulated during 6 years of transportation work at Microsoft. He understood exactly which facilities would be vulnerable, when security shifts changed, and how to exploit the documentation systems that tracked equipment movement. Tommy's planning was sophisticated because he understood Microsoft's operations from the perspective of someone who made them work, explains industrial theft specialist Agent Maria Santos. He knew not just what the procedures were, but why they existed and when they might be relaxed. The specific target Tommy had identified was a shipment of Azure server hardware valued at approximately $34 million, scheduled for transport to Masubiya, Microsoft's new data center in Virginia. The equipment represented the cutting edge of cloud computing technology, servers capable of processing millions of transactions while maintaining the security and reliability that enterprise customers demanded. Tommy chose his target perfectly, admits former logistics coordinator David Martinez. The servers he stole were among Microsoft's most advanced designs, containing proprietary innovations that competitors and foreign governments would pay astronomical prices to examine. Tommy's preparation had included creating sophisticated documentation that would make his theft appear to be legitimate business activity. He had forged transport manifests, shipping authorizations, and route schedules that were nearly indistinguishable from authentic Microsoft paperwork. Tommy's counterfeit documents were so professionally created that they fooled experienced logistics personnel, explains document fraud specialist Dr. Michael Rodriguez. He had studied Microsoft's paperwork systems intensively and created forgeries that contained all the security features and formatting details that would pass casual inspection. The infrastructure supporting Tommy's crime was equally sophisticated. He had rented warehouse space in Portland under a false business identity, arranged for specialized transportation that could handle sensitive computer equipment, and established contact with buyers who could purchase the stolen servers with minimal questions. Tommy had essentially created a complete criminal enterprise, explains money laundering expert Dr. Jennifer Liu. He had facilities for storage, networks for transportation, and buyers for conversion into cash. His operation was more sophisticated than many legitimate businesses. The psychological pressure Tommy faced was enormous. He was about to commit a crime that would destroy his livelihood, betray people who trusted him, and potentially result in a lifetime prison sentence if he was caught. Tommy later told investigators that the night before his theft was the worst of his life, reveals criminal psychologist Dr. Angela Martinez. He understood the magnitude of what he was planning and the consequences if anything went wrong. But his financial desperation had reached the point where he felt he had no other options. On the evening of May 22, 2016, Tommy Alvarez clocked in for what would be his final shift as a Microsoft shuttle driver, carrying forged paperwork that would authorize him to transport $34 million worth of cloud computing equipment into a new life he had spent months planning. May 22, 2016, began as another routine Memorial Day weekend shift for Tommy Alvarez, who arrived at Microsoft's Redmond campus at 6 p.m., carrying the same worn backpack he had used for 6 years. His badge scan registered normally in the security system, and his supervisor noted nothing unusual about his demeanor or preparation routine. Tommy seemed completely normal when he started his shift, recalls operations supervisor Maria Chen. He went through his vehicle inspection checklist, reviewed his route assignments, and even helped another driver with a minor mechanical issue. There was nothing that suggested he was planning anything other than routine transportation duties. For the first 5 hours of his shift, Tommy performed his standard shuttle services with the reliability that had made him a trusted contractor. He transported late-working employees between buildings, handled equipment deliveries for weekend maintenance projects, and maintained the precise scheduling that Microsoft's operations required. Tommy's work during the early part of his shift was exemplary, explains former colleague Carlos Rodriguez. He was punctual, professional, and even more helpful than usual. Several employees complimented his service that evening, but at 11:30 p.m., as the campus entered its quietest period of the weekend cycle, Tommy began the sequence of actions that would change his life forever. Tommy had studied Microsoft's weekend rhythms for years, admits Dr. Chen. He knew exactly when security attention was minimal, when loading dock activity was reduced, and when he could work in sensitive areas without attracting oversight. Tommy's first step was retrieving his forged transportation manifest from a hidden location in his shuttle bus. The documents were sophisticated enough to authorize transport of high-value server equipment, complete with authentic-looking serial numbers, destination information, and security clearances. Tommy's counterfeit paperwork was flawless, observes document authentication expert Dr. Patricia Valdez. He had replicated every security feature of legitimate Microsoft transport documents, including holographic seals and authorization codes that would pass electronic verification. At 11:45 p.m., Tommy drove his shuttle bus to loading dock 12 at Microsoft's server facility, where approximately $34 million worth of Azure hardware awaited transport to the company's Virginia data center. The equipment consisted of 280 specialized servers, each worth approximately $120,000 and collectively representing one of the most valuable technology shipments in corporate history. Tommy's target selection demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Microsoft's technology portfolio, explains cloud computing expert Dr. Michael Kim. He chose servers that contain proprietary innovations in processing power, energy efficiency, and security features that competitors couldn't replicate through legitimate research. The loading process required significant technical expertise and physical capability. Each server weighed approximately 85 pounds and required careful handling to prevent damage to sensitive electronic components. Tommy worked methodically to transfer the equipment from the loading dock to his shuttle bus's cargo compartment. Tommy handled the stolen servers with the same professional care he had shown during legitimate transport operations, observes Dr. Kim. Even while committing theft, he maintained the technical standards necessary to preserve the equipment's value and functionality. The most dangerous moment of Tommy's theft occurred at 12:07 a.m. when security guard Robert Chen conducted a routine patrol of the loading dock area. Chen later told investigators that he had observed Tommy's loading operation, but assumed it was authorized weekend deployment activity. "I saw Tommy with his paperwork, and everything appeared completely legitimate," Chen recalls. "He had proper documentation, was following standard safety procedures, and greeted me professionally. There was nothing that suggested criminal activity rather than routine Microsoft business." At 12:14 a.m., Tommy completed loading the stolen servers and secured his cargo according to the same safety standards he had maintained during 6 years of a legitimate transportation. His forged manifests were perfectly organized, his equipment was properly secured, and his shuttle bus appeared ready for a routine intercity delivery. Tommy's crime was invisible because it was indistinguishable from legitimate Microsoft operations, explains industrial security expert Agent Robert Park. He used authorized equipment, followed standard procedures, and carried documentation that appeared completely authentic. At 12:18 a.m., Tommy drove his shuttle bus through Microsoft's security checkpoint, where guards reviewed his manifests and cleared him for departure. The documents were sophisticated enough to pass electronic verification, and Tommy's demeanor was calm enough to deflect any suspicion. Tommy's execution was perfect because he had weaponized Microsoft's own procedures against the company, reflects FBI corporate crimes specialist Agent Maria Santos. He committed theft while following standard protocols, used legitimate access as camouflage, and maintained normal behavior patterns that completely deflected suspicion. By 12:25 a.m., Tommy was driving south on Interstate 5 toward Oregon, carrying $34 million worth of Microsoft's most advanced server technology and heading toward a new life that he had spent months preparing. Behind him, the Microsoft campus continued its weekend operations, completely unaware that one of its most trusted contractors had just executed the largest corporate theft in company history. The theft of $34 million in Azure server hardware from Microsoft's Redmond campus wasn't discovered until Tuesday morning, May 24th, when IT deployment manager Sarah Kim arrived to coordinate the Virginia data center installation that the stolen servers were supposed to support. Memorial Day weekend had delayed our normal verification procedures, Kim explains. The servers were scheduled for Tuesday deployment, so we didn't expect to audit their status until we began preparation for transport to Virginia. Kim's investigation began when she attempted to locate the server shipment in Microsoft's logistics tracking system. While the equipment showed as in transit in the computer databases, there was no corresponding confirmation of arrival at the Virginia facility or any intermediate transport checkpoints. When I couldn't find delivery confirmation, I initially assumed the shipment had been delayed by holiday traffic or logistics complications, Kim recalls. Interstate transport of sensitive equipment often experienced delays that weren't immediately reflected in our tracking systems. The situation escalated when Kim contacted the Virginia data center and confirmed that no Microsoft hardware shipment had arrived during the holiday weekend. More alarmingly, Microsoft's transportation contractors had no record of any scheduled deliveries during that period. The combination of missing servers and no legitimate transport records immediately suggested either major procedural failure or deliberate theft, explains former logistics director Dr. Jennifer Torres. We implemented emergency security protocols and began comprehensive investigation of all weekend shipping activity. The review of security footage revealed the scope of Tommy's deception. Cameras clearly showed him loading server equipment into his shuttle bus at 11:54 p.m. on May 22nd. But his documentation appeared completely legitimate, and his behavior suggested authorized Microsoft business. Watching the surveillance footage was shocking because Tommy's theft looked so professional and routine, admits former security director Dr. Sarah Chen. Every action appeared consistent with legitimate equipment transport until we realized the servers never reached their intended destination. The investigation revealed that Tommy had vanished as completely as the stolen hardware. His apartment was empty, his personal belongings were gone, and there was no trace of either Tommy or the shuttle bus he had driven away from Microsoft's campus. Tommy's disappearance was as sophisticated as his theft, explains FBI industrial crimes investigator Agent Maria Santos. He had eliminated all connections to his previous life and had apparently prepared for extended evasion of law enforcement pursuit. Microsoft faced immediate crisis management challenges. The theft represented not just financial loss, but potential compromise of proprietary Azure technology that could benefit competitors or foreign intelligence services. The company needed to balance law enforcement cooperation with protection of trade secrets. Microsoft's response had to address multiple stakeholders while protecting our competitive advantages, explains corporate crisis consultant Dr. Michael Rodriguez. We needed to cooperate with investigators without revealing technical specifications that competitors could exploit. The company issued a carefully worded public statement acknowledging a transportation security incident involving data center equipment, but avoided specific details about the theft's scope or the nature of the compromised technology. Microsoft's communication strategy was designed to maintain market confidence while providing minimal information that could be exploited by criminal organizations or competitor companies, Dr. Rodriguez explains. The goal was transparency without vulnerability. The FBI investigation would ultimately involve multiple agencies, international cooperation efforts, and sophisticated technology tracking techniques. But Tommy Alvarez and Microsoft's stolen server technology had disappeared into a global underworld where cutting-edge American technology could be converted into untraceable wealth. Tommy had executed a theft that was more sophisticated than most corporate espionage operations, Agent Santos reflects. His crime combined technical expertise, logistical planning, and psychological manipulation in ways that challenge every assumption about corporate security threats.